Hey everybody, it's Lynea. I am so excited to answer some questions from followers today. I said, hey, what are your questions on wedding planning, photography, industry, whatever you need to know? And y'all really turned up. And I want to say thank you so much to the people who provided a question. If you did not get a chance to provide a question, I'm going to do this again. So in the description, there's a little link where you can submit your question in the Google Forms, and I will do this again. And the last thing that I want to say before we dive into it is that if I'm going to try to rapid fire through these things to answer as many questions as I can. So if I don't answer yours to the extent that you're looking for, or you want me to dive in deeper, just let me know in the comments below. Maybe I can do another shorts or reels video to kind of expand on that topic in general. Or if you wanted to, you could always hire me for one-on-one consulting, right? We get on a video chat and talk for an hour about your needs and questions. And you can do that at theweddingtalk.com. So all of this said, I'm going to try to create little timestamps on what these questions are so that way you don't have to watch the whole video if you don't want to. I mean, I would love if you did, but that way you can skip through and find what you need. So all of that said, let's get into it. Number one, hey Lynea, can you help me with the vendor roles? Planner, designer, florist, photographer, who is actually handling the design, timeline, logistics, setup, and aesthetics on the day of? Great question, a little tricky to answer. And the reason why is because there's not always a set standard on what role they will be fulfilling. It is kind of dependent on the business that you hire, the vendor that you hire, and what they will and won't do. Generally, planners and coordinators are handling the logistics. They're doing the timeline, they're talking to your vendors. The florist is definitely helping you with the design, and they're definitely helping with the execution because they're there setting it up on the day of. And photographer, if they're good, they should be helping you with the timeline. That's my answer there. There's also a crossover, and it really depends on what the vendors will and won't do with that crossover. So say, for example, my service is all inclusive, right? So I plan the logistics, I do the design in collaboration with your florist. On the day of the coordination, I set up in collaboration with your florist. I also, in collaboration, work with your photographer to make sure the timeline is according to plan, and I pick up and set up in the end of the day. So I'm working with your team as a whole, but I'm also filling in the gaps where is necessary. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, let's do a vendor example that doesn't include things like that. So we have a day of coordination, right? You're responsible for all of the planning. They step in the very end to handle all the logistics, but let's say they don't do any setup. So that's when the florist will need to step in as execution of setting up the design. But this is where you really need to ask, what will they do? What won't they do? Because if day of coordination is not setting up anything, they're just coordinating things. You ask the florist and they say, I'm only setting things up that have to do with florals or things that I'm bringing. Then there's kind of this other bubble of little decor items that are not in those categories that might be left out. So let's say bar sign, for example, a welcome sign, for example. If your florist is not setting those things up and your day of coordination is not setting those things up, you need to identify what setup that is, and that either goes to your bridal party, a family member, the venue, for example, or you need to hire somebody else. The key here is reading your vendor contracts very thoroughly. If they're a good vendor, they should have what they will and won't do labeled, outlined very clearly. And if it's not very clearly, you need to just interview and do a great job refining what happens. That way there's a perfect overlay of the responsibilities and nothing's left behind. Number 2. We are a fabulous couple over the age of 50, and I'm not really relating to the wedding TikTok videos. What is your recommendation for a non-traditional wedding for us? First of all, congratulations. What I typically see for our golden couples is you go one of two ways: really big or really small. So the first option is often going on a destination wedding, bringing all of your favorite friends, family, everybody that you want to be in the same room on a trip together and spending the week together. Highly recommend either hiring a travel agent for this or a destination planner to help you through this process. But often what we've seen is a little welcome party upon arrival. The next day you do a small ceremony, a small dinner to celebrate. Maybe hire a photographer during that time. And then the following days you spend doing tourist activities together and just taking that week to celebrate each other and celebrate the people that you're around and then leaving. It's not like go big in a way of you're creating a huge wedding. It's more of going big in a way of creating a lot of experiences for your guests and just making time to celebrate in that big way. The second option is simplifying down all the way, kind of stripping away all those unnecessary elements of the traditional wedding. Maybe, for example, you don't need a bridesmaid or groomsman, right? Maybe just the two of you get ready together in the morning time. You have your small micro wedding ceremony. And then instead of a reception that goes on for like 6 hours and there's dancing and traditions and all those things, maybe you all just go to a restaurant, set up in a private room and have a nice cocktail style reception instead. Just cocktails and apps and dinner. Totally up to you on how much you want to spend on this budget with your attire or decor. There's a scale. And so just kind of think and talk to each other about what direction that you'd want to go. Do you want to make it a really big deal and go somewhere extravagant, or just keeping it small, intimate, minimal planning, and just within one day? 3. Hey, Lynea, I don't want to decorate with any flowers or greenery. No artificial, no real flowers. How do I decorate? Great question. So obviously candles is kind of the go-to response for this. Candles, there's a million different ways that you could do that. Pillar candles, tea light candles, taper candles, using different kind of votives, glassware, vases. You can really do a lot with different votives and vessels. Also, you could go thrifting, find pictures, use frames, use books, use mirrors, different kinds of signage. Fruit is really in right now, if that's kind of up your alley. And also using fabrics for drapery. I feel like there's so many different ways that you could do centerpieces without florals these days. It's amazing. I should probably make a Pinterest board with examples and I will get back to you on that, but hopefully this is a good start to get you going. Oh, also don't forget lighting. Lighting is such a big part of decoration, whether you're using lamps also or just like uplighting or unique colors, projectors, those kinds of things. 4, my venue won't let me use sparklers. I really had my heart set on it. What could I use instead for a grand exit? This is definitely a problem that many people are having because I really feel like venues are just doing away with the ability to do sparklers. If they can't do cold sparklers, which is kind of the same exact thing, but it's a little less fire. If they can't do cold sparklers, the next best things are like bubbles. Ribbon wands are so cute. They look amazing. There's also like little LED lights that you can shine, or glow sticks, which is really fun. Or if you're doing things outside and they won't mind, you could do things like dried flowers or even do like a champagne pop while everybody is around. I've also seen people get really creative with this, like doing balloons or doing paper airplanes. So have fun with it. Oh, I was also thinking you could do like an artificial candle tunnel too, where everybody like holds a candle. That'd be so beautiful. Hey, Lynea, I am not sure if I should get a shuttle or transportation for my wedding guests. It's a lot of money, but I know it might be necessary. What do you think? It can be a lot of money, and I totally understand why you're questioning this. So I have a lot of questions. 1, is all of your guests pretty local? If they're local, they can drive on their own. They can figure it out. But if they're all coming from out of town, it's really important that you provide transportation for them. That said, I would talk to your hotel and see like, do they have a shuttle? Can they negotiate a deal into your room block if they allow you to use the shuttle? Sometimes I've had guests, be able to have a shuttle for free because they included it with the room block. Also, another question to ask is like, how close are you to things? Is there things like Uber and Lyft available? And I say that hesitantly because if you have 200 guests and they all need to get an Uber at the same time, that's going to be really complicated, very messy. But a smaller guest list would be just fine. Another question I would ask is, what's the parking situation at your venue? Is it confusing? Is it limited? Would it be easier if just a bus dropped everybody off and picked them up? Mostly. The final thing to consider is how much drinking is going to be happening, because obviously you don't want people drinking and driving. Think of your guests. Are they responsible people? Or how soon is your bar going to end service? The last thing that you want to be worrying about is people drinking and driving on your wedding night. That's like, we want to protect our people. So it really is worth it in the budget to protect people's safety. Can you please describe what a golden hour photography is for wedding portraits? I keep seeing everybody talk about it. It seems straightforward, but I have questions. Okay, fair, valid. You're probably asking about like the logistics of what the sunset portrait is. When I'm working weddings, I always calculate when the sunset is actually down, and then ideally you want to get out there, I'd say 20 to 40 minutes before it goes all the way down. And this really varies depending on where you are. Like I've had weddings where the sun goes down at 8, but they're in the middle of a valley and mountains, and the sun's gone well before 8. Or very flat beachy areas where like it's still really bright right at the very end. So it really depends on the location that you're at. It's going to be vital that your photographer is paying attention on the day of like where the sunset is, and just be aware that it may be in the middle of your dinner, and sometimes that happens. And it's going to be up to you on the day of like, do I want sunset portraits or do I want to sit down and eat? Up to you. I will say they are always my favorite out of an entire gallery. They are so beautiful to have. So if you can make the time for it, make the time for it. But just make sure to be prepared that it should be about, I would say, 30 minutes before the actual sun goes down. Next, we've got wedding invitations. What to put on them, what to word them, when to send them out. I need all of the help. All right, so let me give you my breakdown list of everything that's essential. Okay, so you've got your full names, the event date, the start times, the venue name and address, a hosting line typically like welcome to or we invite you to, RSVP instructions, a link to your wedding website if you've got one, and then a dress code. Those are kind of like the mandatory things that you need to put on there. Extra things that might be fun to include is the ceremony type. If it's unplugged, you might want to mention that. Accommodation, hotel, information, all that stuff you can put it on the website, but sometimes people like putting it on the invites as well. You could do a QR code to your website, love that. A personal note, your wedding hashtag, custom map or like directions on parking, all those kinds of things, and a schedule of the weekend events if you have other things going on. So that's my main list. I hope that helps. Also, the send out time really varies depending on like if all your people are local, you could send it out like 3 to 4 months in advance. But if you're going to be traveling and having more of a destination situation for some of your guests, I would do 6 to 8 months in advance. As for design, I love Minted. I mean, this is not sponsored by any means, but I just love them. I love that you can match your website to the invites, and also they support individual artists, which is my favorite thing. I love the designs there, so that's where I would recommend kind of playing around with the designs. Hey Lynea, to wear a veil or not to wear a veil? That is the question. I can't really tell you exactly what you should do because it comes down to personal preference, what your wedding dress looks like. But, I feel like we've moved away from the tradition of you have to wear a veil. I think a lot of people are opting to not wear one, which is perfectly fine. Some people opt to have them in certain events. So say they only wear them at the ceremony and they take it off for reception. Maybe they put it back on for those sunset portraits that we discussed earlier, and just kind of get more pictures. But there's a lot of styles out there. There's the really long ones that are cathedral. You also could do like fingertip length. There's also like birdcage and blusher. Make sure you do your research on them to see what you like and just trust your heart. If you wanted to accessorize without a veil, there's so many options now. There's amazing headbands, hats, hair pieces, clips, different kind of jewelry things that you could have in your hair. I did little like pearl attachments into my hair for my wedding, and have fun with it. Just play with your style. Next up, hey Lynea, I'm about to sign my venue contract, but I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. What do I need to look out for before signing? Great question. I am actually just going to pull up my list for this. Okay, you want clear definitions of everything, your venue name and your address. You want to make sure you're double checking the spelling, double checking the location accuracy, and also confirm the governing clause. So this is like if you're traveling, for example, say you live in Florida, but the venue is in New York, and the governing clause is this contract is governed by the law of New York, and any disputes are going to be handled in New York. You just need to be made aware of that. You want to look for the event date and time frame, exclusivity clause that you're going to be the only wedding happening that day, or if there's other weddings, like what are the rules around that, the total cost and payment schedule, so looking out for your deposits, the installments, the due dates, what kind of is the cancellation policy if anything happens. I also want to add in there, are tours going to be happening on your wedding day? I don't know. Sometimes that's in the contract, sometimes it's not. Next, what is included, and it needs to be clearly defined, okay? You got tables, chairs, linens, on-site coordination, sound systems, restrooms, those kinds of things. What is included? What is not included? And they need to be clear about like what specifically is involved with that, as well as what's not allowed, like open flame, confetti, sparklers. You're going to check for the catering policies, if it needs to be in-house, out-house, menu customization, tasting, information, minimum spend or pricing. Also a gratuity fee. You want to make sure you're aware, like is a 22% going to be kicked in at the end? Like just paying attention to those things. Same thing with bar, open versus cash, corkage fees, hours of service, and just general rules of like what alcohol rules they have there. So say, for example, you're getting ready sweet. Like, can you bring in a bottle of champagne, or is that a problem? Can you do shots with your bridal party before the ceremony? Final things, we've got a rain plan, backup space. It helps to see if it's not in the contract that you are made aware of, that they can handle that. Noise restrictions and curfew, vendor access and load-in time, cleanup responsibility, photography and videography restrictions. This is so important. Make sure that there's if there's an image rights clause or anything like that, like if your photographer needs to send them photos at the end of the wedding or something, people are throwing in weird things in contracts these days. So just make sure you understand the rules. Finally, insurance requirements from you and your vendors as well, so you're ahead of that. And then the signature. But that's everything that you should be looking at. I actually have a big PDF that I've posted on Pinterest, so go find that. Hey Lynea, when do I need to cut the cake? Most of the time I've seen it well after the dinner, but I feel like sometimes people do it a little bit too late. Could I even do it before the ceremony? Why not have cake as a welcome treat? Good question. I would love cake as a welcome treat. So cake cutting can truly happen whenever you decide. I mean, unless you have a baker that's giving you a very specific rule, or the catering includes the dessert service at a certain time, make sure you ask your venue, your vendors first before you make a decision. But honestly, you could do whatever the heck you want. I will say oftentimes it happens after dinner. That seems pretty, basic and traditional, but if you want to change it up. Next up. Hey, can you give me a general month breakdown of planning? I'm thinking my wedding will be about 12 to 14 months in advance. I'm not sure when I should be doing things. Heck yeah, I can. Let's talk about the month breakdown. So generally 12 to 14 months is the initial stages. You're talking with your partner, having a lot of conversations about what you're actually looking for, talking about budget, making your guest list. I would throw in there starting wedding dress shopping right away, because sometimes it takes that long, as well as hire a wedding planner if you can or want to, and begin those wedding venue tours. You want to get and see those things right away and book that wedding venue. Oftentimes, this will also check off bar and catering. If it comes with your venue, that's great. And then also they'll provide you with some vendor recommendations, which is also great. So that'll kickstart the next phase. So after you do that, let's say you're at 10 or 11 months out now, you're going to start booking and seeking those vital vendors. Your photographer, your videographer, your DJ, catering and bar if it doesn't come with the venue. Those really crucial vendors that make up the whole day. I would also start working on travel and accommodations, booking hotel blocks if that's something that you can now that you know where the venue is going to be, and creating your wedding website. So that way you can kind of set up details before invites and save the dates, that kind of stuff goes out. The next step would be 8 to 9 months out. That's when you know what vendors that you're working with, you've locked in those key vendors, then you go into those kind of supplemental vendors or design vendors. So you're thinking about what rentals you need, you're hiring a florist, maybe talking to an officiant at this time. Also, save the dates can go out if that's something that you're interested in. It's also a great time to pick your bridal party and begin letting them know about the events that are going to be leading up to the wedding day. 6 months out is kind of an awkward place because you do a lot. You've already booked all of your vendors, but you're not quite close enough to start making big decisions. So it kind of feels like an awkward time. But that would be a perfect time to finalize your attire, pick out dresses, pick out suits, and get your family members prepped. Think about how you want the ceremony to go. 4 to 5 months, that's when things start to kick it up a notch. You start sending out the invitations and dealing with a million RSVPs, updating your website website frequently is huge on that, and just making sure that all the vendors are, wrapped up. And if there's any kind of like outstanding vendor things that you need to do, make sure you're handling that. Also, a great time to book your trials and get a hair and makeup artist person locked in if you haven't already. And think about any additional little things you need. Like maybe you want to do a photo booth or just, something extra like guest portraits. That's when you really start thinking about the little details. And purchasing decor. 3 months out, you're finalizing like those alterations. You're making sure the suits are coming in again with those kind of like smaller details, gathering some decor inventory, just getting a little bit more organized in the planning system. If you didn't hire a planner, definitely look for a day of coordinator. So that way you have somebody to help come in at the end of the day. They can help guide you as you get closer. And finally, you can get into like stationery and signage and start designing some of those things. 1 month before things really kick into gear, you're meeting with all of your vendors to finalize all the details. The timeline is looking perfect. You understand and know what's going on, finalizing those like last minute decor details and putting them in the boxes with labels, and hopefully starting to feel a little bit more relaxed that everything starts to come together. And at the very end, let's say like a week beforehand, that's when you do all of the little extra like personal things like getting your hair cut, doing your spa treatments, make sure your vows are being written, make sure you got your marriage license taken care of, and that you've got the rings and the ring box, all those tiny details. So that's my general answer to that question. I hope that helps. Next up, we've got, hey, I am thinking about having a wedding, but we want to do something like an Indian Western fusion kind of wedding. How do I do that? How do we celebrate both beautifully? Love this question, and it's totally up to you on how you want to do it. Some people will have 2 total weddings, one that's strictly Western in the beginning of the year, one that's strictly Indian wedding at the end of the year, or they will combine it in one weekend. And the key to doing that is just prioritizing what's important to you from both traditions, from both sides of the weddings and the traditions that come with them. Also, fusing the decor, fusing the food experiences. Guests love to learn from both sides. So just pick out what's important to you. I will say the one that I did work recently is they had like a half day the day before that celebrated an Indian ceremony, and then the day after they did like a full traditional Western wedding, and then the day after they did more of like laid back Indian cultural stuff. And so it's just like a 3-day extravaganza. It was absolutely amazing. But that's my example, and I hope you figure out what's best for you. Hey, Lynea, can you give me your best tip for having a destination wedding? Okay, best tips. I'm going to make it into 2. Plan ahead. I'm going to make it into 3. Understand the location that you are going, because like, say for example, if you're going to Bermuda, sometimes venues cannot even book you until 6 months out. Some venues are so high in demand, say for in Italy, for example, you have to plan 2 years in advance. So like, depends on where you're going to be going for it. Give yourself plenty of time. Make sure you understand where you're going and the rules involved. And then finally, decor is very weird when you are doing a destination wedding. Obviously, you can't bring a lot of stuff with you, so you're going to be really reliant on your venue to provide things, your florist to provide things, or rental companies. Try your best to think a little bit more simply, a lot more simple than if you were doing something in your backyard, where you could bring a ton of stuff with you. Is creating a QR code worth it for a wedding? 100%. And it's so easy. Truly, it depends on what you're using it for, whether you're using it for your website or you're using it to like send people to a Google photo album so they can drop in photos, which is such a good idea. All you have to do is go on Canva and get into that little apps section. There's a QR code app where you just drop in the URL and it creates it for you. It's super easy and it's free. I think that you're able to do it without Canva Pro, but I'm not entirely sure. If not, don't spend a lot of money on this, because you don't need to spend a lot of money, okay? If you can't find somebody to help you make a QR code, you just email me, okay? theweddingtalkllc@gmail.com. I'll help you make a QR code. Hey, Lynea, can you talk about warming of the rings and what to do during that time? Ooh, okay, good one, because if you have a small guest count, the warming of the rings is beautiful and perfect. If you have hundreds of people that are all trying to pass around the ring, either don't do that and just do like the first reserved rows, warm the rings, and then everybody can, pretend that they were a part of it. Or if you're going to have it go through literally everybody, it's important that you do something in the meantime. Say, for example, you start the warming of the rings and you let it pass, and then you do another form of like unity ceremony, or poems are being read or something's being sang. So that way there's something going on during the passing of the rings, because it takes way longer than you anticipate. Yes, I have definitely been to a wedding where we only had the warming of the rings planned and we all just stared at the ring passing from guest to guest for like 15 minutes, dude. It was very weird. So go with the front row, do something in between, or if it's a small guest count, it's not going to be that bad. But that's my recommendation for the warming of the rings. It's such a cute, beautiful, like unity ceremony though. And if you don't want people to actually touch the rings, you could also, like, I've seen people that are very spiritual say, put your hand out and say a prayer over the couple in the rings during this time. So like that's something that you could do as an alternative, but lots of options there. Hey Lynea, we're having a backyard wedding. Do I rent or do I buy items? Ooh, it's tough question. If you want nothing to do with weddings after the wedding is over with, it's just a one and done situation, rent. Even if it is a little bit more expensive than buying, just having them come in, do what they got to do, and then leave, so that way you don't have to worry about it after, is nice. It is worth doing. Also, the setup for when you're buying things is pretty extensive. So if you don't have that many people that are going to be helping, rent is 100%. On the other side, if you feel like maybe you are going to start your own wedding rental company, or you'll have use for 12 long banquet tables, then buying is a pretty good option, especially if you can get things on sale. When we bought for our wedding tables, actually, I found somebody, like an old rental company, that was selling all of their stuff to bring in new stuff, and I got an awesome deal. So check Facebook Marketplace, really utilize those things. Yes, you can sell things once the wedding's over, but I gotta tell you, it's not very reliable. A lot of people buy artificial flowers thinking that they're gonna sell them after the wedding, and a lot of people don't want them after, especially things for like linens, for example. If you buy linens, you're not really going to be able to resell them unless they are somehow in pristine condition. But guests are so messy. They will stain them. So, it's a give and take on what you plan on doing. Go for ease and with renting, but also, sometimes you can get things at a discounted rate for buying. Anyway, if you're going to be DIYing a backyard wedding, I recommend spending a lot of time just researching, vetting out what is the best option, and you will figure it out what's best for you. Okay, I think the last one for today. Hey, my wedding is not going to involve a lot of dancing. My guests do not dance, I do not dance, and I don't really want to hire a DJ for a very long time. What do you recommend we do? So if you're not going to dance, that's totally fine. There's a lot of different ways that you could approach this. You could hire a performer and, have them play music. So it's more of like a mingling and relaxing vibe. You can watch somebody, perform. It's always so beautiful and very entertaining. You could also go a total extreme. You could hire a serious performer, like somebody to watch during this, whether it's like an aerialist or a comedian, or you have like a video presentation that you've put together. That would be something really cool to watch during the ceremony, during the reception time instead of dancing. Also providing people with a lot of photogenic opportunities. So having a photo booth around, or having Polaroids, or, an app on your phone that they could take pictures of throughout the night is really fun, just to give them something else to do, as well as like card games on the tables, or lawn games outside, maybe fire pits, something else that they could go and just enjoy their activities with. My cocktail toppers. I don't know if you've seen them before, but I make edible cocktail toppers, and it's a truth or dare game. People love it. It's super fun. So just providing little games and icebreakers is a great way to do that. Or if you want to go like really extreme, and I've had people do this, is different like culinary experiences. So you could do like a wine tasting, or you could do like an olive oil tasting, or create like mixed perfumes and fragrances for the favors. have like an engraving station or like a character station. I've had people do a tattoo booth at their wedding before, as well as tarot readings in their wedding. Like there's so many different things that you could do that are not dancing. So I hope I've at least given you one option. Whew, okay, that's all I have the time for today. I hope these are helpful, and I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. And if you have any other questions, thank you so much for submitting, and I'll talk to you later. Happy planning!